Yesterday, we got our first look at Halo Infinite multiplayer, alongside some new campaign footage, and while we are done talking about the story of Infinite, today we'll dive into the multiplayer side of things. Between the reveal, the official articles, and now the multiplayer overview from 343 themselves, there is a ton to break down and discuss. And yes, that includes some new lore along with just gameplay. So, let's discuss everything we know about Halo Infinite multiplayer, today on Halo Canon. I want to start things off with one of the first things we heard in yesterday's reveal trailer, the voice of Spartan Commander Laurette, pictured here. Spartan Laurette is the second Spartan commander we've encountered, if my memory serves, and I've seen a lot of speculation that she's replacing Palmer. However, we've already heard from Jennifer Hale, the voice of Sarah Palmer, that she's recorded lines for Infinite. Palmer is not gone, and Laurette's role at the moment seems to be more multiplayer focused, part of the experience of building your own Spartan. There can be more than one Spartan commander, and there certainly are, as not all Spartan 4s, and not even the majority of them, are stationed on Infinity. At the moment, we don't know a whole lot about Commander Laurette, though one interesting detail pointed out by the Eld on Twitter is the presence of a number on Laurette's Fusion Power Pack, 327. This could potentially identify her as a Spartan 3. Now, the number is in an odd position, Spartan numbers usually being put on or around the chest, but that doesn't really disprove anything. It's just different. If she turns out to be a Spartan 3, that would be an awesome extra detail. The 3s really don't get enough love in my opinion, even in the extended universe. Laurette is one of the three main voices players will hear during their matches, in addition to the returning Spartan chatter, of course. She's not replacing Jeff Steitzer, he's back with his badass voice and sounding better than ever. Laurette instead will feature in the expanded Big Team Battle for Infinite and had the new Academy feature. The Academy is essentially a training ground with two modes. In one, players can test out Infinite's sandbox in a controlled target range to get used to the weapons, and in another, players can dive into a customizable training mode where they can select their own loadouts in-game to boot, and fight against and with AI-controlled bots in mock matches to get used to Infinite's gameplay and maps. These bots will feature a variety of skill levels too to further help players train, and they can even be added to custom games to fill in empty player slots. This is just one of many ways that Infinite is striving to make itself accessible to all players. And as a quick aside, I'll be curious to see how features like training mode and AI bots work with Forge maps, if at all. But anyway. Halo Infinite's customization, as we learned a long time ago, is heavily based on the system featured in Halo Reach, though with some changes. Probably our best look so far comes from the actual Halo Infinite page on Xbox.com, where we can see that customization will feature an armor core, as it's called, with coatings, helmets, visors, left and right shoulders, gloves, and knee pads for customization. The armor core is basically a base armor set, and rather than choosing entire armor sets like we did in Halo 4 and 5, you choose an armor core and change certain features, such as the aforementioned visor, shoulders, gloves, etc. In the footage, we can seemingly see three armor cores. Halo Reach's Mark V, the Yoroi armor core, referred to as the Samurai armor core by Ryan Paradis, and the Mark VII. In addition, there will also be attachments, of course, for the helmet, thighs, and forearm. The final part of this customization is the armor coating, which is a predetermined set of colors and textures that apply to the entire Spartan. So yes, while you can choose individual armor pieces, your armor colors are locked in place by the armor coating. There is no per-piece coating selection, which is kind of a disappointment in my book. That said, as I was reviewing this footage, I spotted a few things that are kind of turning me around on the coating system. For example, we can see the soldier helmet a couple times in a few different scenes, one with the forested camo pattern and another with a simple purple coating. However, in the latter example, the front of the helmet is black. Basically, we have the same helmet with two very different sets of textures and color distribution. Doing this with a more traditional system would likely overload the player with too many options, and be more likely to turn them off to the system rather than welcoming them in. Another aspect of Infinite's customization is the personal AI. I mentioned before that there were three primary voices players would be hearing in multiplayer, the first two being Spartan Laurette and Jeff Steitzer. The third is the personal AI.
Please call us at your earliest convenience.
The nature of this customization option remains largely unknown, but we can see and hear that they're inspired by the Halo 3 ODST Superintendent and play into how much the UNSC is leaning into dumb AI in a post-created world. These personal AI aren't just for show, however, as they'll actually play a part in the game, such as capturing objectives. One thing I'd love to see 343 do as time goes on is add some celebrity voices, so to speak, like a Johnson AI, or Pete Stacker AI, or Keith David AI. Basically, bring in some notable Halo voice actors and make them into personal AI. I think that would be really cool. In addition to the armor, coatings, etc., players can also customize aspects of their Spartan's body. You can choose your body type, which sounds like it'll be expanding upon the basic gender selection of previous games, choose their voice, and add prosthetics. From the Vidoc, we can see that players can add prosthetic limbs to both arms and both legs, but it's more than a simple toggle. For arms at least, a player can choose to have a prosthetic hand, or have the prosthetic extend up to the elbow or shoulder. That is pretty damn cool. Halo Infinite will of course feature a Battle Pass system, with new passes releasing as seasons come to the game. However, while there will be aspects of real-world money involved, aka microtransactions, the game will not feature loot boxes or any elements of randomness when it comes to these microtransactions. Further, not unlike MCC, purchased Battle Passes will never expire. They'll be purchasable during future seasons, and players can choose where to invest their progression if they have multiple passes. Unlocks will be earned via gameplay, challenges, events, and purchases. Some stuff can only be earned in gameplay. The events will be time limited, as I'm sure many of you have guessed, with special rewards. One example of this is the sick-ass samurai armor we saw in the reveal trailer, the Yaori armor. Named for the Yaori style of armor worn by feudal samurai, and I'm sorry if I've been mispronouncing this stuff, this is basically just straight up samurai armor and I am loving it. The first season of Halo Infinite will be called Heroes of Reach, which is why we're seeing so many Reach armor sets in these videos. Speaking of which, looking at the videos and images we've gotten recently and in the past, there are a ton of familiar armor sets coming to Infinite, both from Mjolnir's Gen 1 and 2. I'm not going to bother listing all of the specific armor sets, though I thought I might highlight a few of the helmets that we've seen in the last couple days. Commando, CQB, Soldier, what might be Atlas, CQC, Mark 5B, this unnamed helmet that we saw late last year, Emil's EVA helmet, skull included, Recon, Aviator, Mark 5 Classic, Anubis, and ODST. And these are just the ones we saw in the footage, never mind the Mark 5 Scout and Grenadier from other visuals. If this is all present at launch, and I suspect that's the case, there will be a ton of classic and a few new customization options for players, and that's only going to expand as time goes on. A number of vehicles are present in the footage, and I'd like to touch on them briefly. We get to see the Mongoose, Warthog, Rocket Hog, and Razorback, all sporting 343 era designs. By the way, I failed to mention back when it was revealed that the Razorback was actually first mentioned in the ARG I Love Bees back in 2004 in a one-off line.
Look, it was nothing, okay? It was some friends of mine, they turtled a Razorback and then they had to return the gate pass or else Dwayne's dad was gonna get spiked for dereliction.
I love that 343 were able to apply this name that appeared once, more than 15 years ago, to this new vehicle. And the vehicle itself is pretty damn cool, allowing multiple players to jump on, and capable of carrying additional weapons around the battlefield. We also see the Wasp, largely unchanged from Halo 5, the Ghost and Chopper, both recognizable though decked out in banished colors, the Banshee sporting a more Reach and 4 design with, again, some banished flair, and both the Scorpion and Wraith tanks, both returning to their classic looks. There's another vehicle present in this footage, but we'll circle back to that later, wink wink. One thing I am curious about though is how different the banished variants of traditional vehicles might be. Like, in Halo Wars 2, we can see that the banished ghosts are quite a bit heavier than their Covenant cousins. And even in this trailer, when a Banshee is dropped in, it seems to fall with some real weight to it. So I wonder if the vehicles might act heavier or slower or anything, not in a way that makes them unfun, but just in a way that reflects the banished. A big change with vehicles, overall, is how damage affects gameplay. We can see in the footage a Warthog driving around with a missing tire. The damage a vehicle receives will affect the handling of said vehicle. We also get to see the Doomstate alarm, which we first heard about in Inside Infinite. This will let players know that they have very little health and time with the vehicle left. So now let's talk about weapons. There are a ton of new and familiar weapons in this footage. We of course have stuff we've seen before or stuff returning from previous games, like the MA-40 Assault Rifle, the BR-75 Battle Rifle, the VK-78 Commando, the Sniper Rifle, the Spanker Rocket Launcher, the Bulldog, the Energy Sword, the Gravity Hammer, the Pulse Carbine, the Needler, the Ravager, the Plasma Pistol, and of course, the Sidekick, sporting its new design. Interestingly, many of these weapons have new or standout features. The AR and Needler once again feature smart scoping, the Energy Sword seems to have a new kick-ass lunge animation, the Gravity Hammer has what I would call an awkwardly long swing time, and the Plasma Pistol features the Halo 5 Sangheili-inspired design. Glad to see some of the newer designs are sticking around. We get to see the Skewer in action here, firing giant spikes that work equally well against vehicles and personnel. Though perhaps most interesting of all is what I'm certain to be a Forerunner weapon of some kind. Functionally similar to a scattershot, this new gun fires rounds of plasma or hard light that can bounce off the environment. That's not all though, as it seems to have an alt-firing mode, changing from a widespread shot to a concentrated shot, which disintegrates the target on impact. That's damn cool, and I'm excited to see if other guns have alt-firing modes like this. It even sounds like it's charging at one point, seeming to indicate that you can charge the shot up, presumably for increased damage. Now, let's talk equipment. We're already familiar with the drop wall, though we can see in the trailer that it sports a new look, a more geometric and simple design compared to last year. Personally, I prefer the old design, this one looking, if I'm to be perfectly honest, like it's more of an early prototype or proof of concept than the finished product. On a more positive note, we get to see the grapple hook pulling off some awesome feats, such as launching into the air for a no-scope and then into a beatdown, pulling a weapon over to the player, and my favorite of all, skyjacking a vehicle, or grapplejacking as it's called. I'll be curious just how difficult this last feat is, and if players being jacked have any way to fight back before the jacking is complete. We also see the overshield and active camo in the game, which are now full-on pieces of equipment that can be deployed at a player's discretion. Two new pieces of equipment are premiered in this footage though. First up we have the threat sensor, which is essentially a deployable Promethean vision with a limited range. You can deploy a sensor and enemies within its pulse are highlighted, even through walls. Second is the repulsor, which does what it says. At one point we can see it sending an overcharged plasma shot back at the player who fired it, and in today's Vidoc, we saw a player using it to boost their jump. This is probably my single favorite piece of equipment shown to date, and I feel like you could make an entire game around this one mechanic. It's really cool, and I can't wait to get my hands on it. As a quick side note, the Jackal Shield seriously needs to be a piece of equipment for multiplayer, somewhere down the line. It's been 20 years, it's long overdue for that to be usable by Spartans. Now then, let's dive into the real meat of this reveal, the game types and modes. Infinite will feature traditional arena multiplayer and a revamped big team battle. Game types shown so far include Classic Slayer, CTF, Strongholds, and Oddball. And let me just say, the Oddball looks great here, mixing in aspects of various skull designs from the games over the years. Halo 4's will always be my personal favorite, but this is a close second. Also, is it just me, or does this scene look like a taunt? Like, are we getting taunts in Infinite? Anyway, little is said about Arena as the big focus is the new BTB. A 12v12 experience now, Big Team Battle will fully embrace the chaos of Halo multiplayer. Replacing traditional weapon and vehicle spawns will be weapon pods, dropping in ordnance not unlike Halo 4, though don't think that means personal ordnance, and vehicles will be dropping in via pelicans. When this happens, Spartan Commander Laurette's voice will inform players of the incoming firepower. This new BTB mode looks amazing to be sure, though I hope a more traditional BTB experience can be had if players want, i.e. you can have vehicles spawn at the base directly rather than being dropped in. More options are always a good thing. I'd also love if the player count could be upped further in future updates, even if it's just on, next-gen consoles and PC, but that's a minor thing overall. One thing we definitely need to talk about here is something I'm sure everyone's noticed by now: the lack of red versus blue multiplayer. With the implementation of the coding system, 343 has decided to drop red versus blue to allow players to show off their sick armor colors. For anyone worried about being able to identify enemies and allies, however, fear not. Halo Infinite will feature a new friend or foe system, similar to what Gears of War has done. By default, enemy players will be outlined in red and allies in blue. However, if these colors don't work for you for any reason, you'll be able to customize them to your preferences. Though certainly motivated by the implementation of the coding system, this is also an example of how accessible 343 is working to make Infinite. I would love if, before launch, 343 could dedicate an entire Inside Infinite article expressly to the accessibility options they're adding to the game. My last big topic today that I want to address are the maps. In the footage and images we've seen, there look to be 5 maps that 343 are showing off. We have one set in a sandy desert, Halo ring visible in the distance with a large central tower and a huge ring-like structure around the perimeter. Another looks like it's set in a poorer neighborhood of a human world, with exploding bananas for some reason. I'm curious if this is a world or a location we've heard of before. And of course, there's the water treatment plant we saw months ago in Inside Infinite. The 4th is probably the coolest in terms of lore. Whatever the map is called, it's set on the Avery J. Johnson Academy of Military Science, a wonderful tribute to everyone's favorite cigar-chopping badass who knows what the ladies like. And it is definitely an appropriate place for Spartans to train. The final map is a BTB map, presumably set on Zeta Halo, with a pair of beam emitters acting as the bases. When the map is first shown, we get probably our best look at the stone ring structures we've been seeing as part of Zeta Halo since 2018, and I don't know if I just missed this before, but they have some kind of intricate metal work along the inside, which kind of explains the ethereal portal look the one on the menu for the July 2020 demo had. I'm really curious now if these are more than just decoration, but that's for another time. This upcoming Wednesday will feature a new Canon fodder diving into the maps, vehicles, armors, and more, so hopefully we'll get some names and simple descriptions, if not more, for these maps at that time. I'm especially excited to learn more about that Academy map. That basically wraps up what we know at the moment, though there are a few other details that stood out that I couldn't really work into the main body of this video. So we'll just tackle them one point at a time here. Ranked and Social will of course return, and the game will feature skill-based matchmaking just like it has since Halo 2. The game will also support LAN via PC local server. Split screen will be available on Xbox, which is great to hear. Theater was name dropped by Joe Staten in the Vidoc, so that's returning. It seems like we'll be getting view model adjusting capabilities based on some of the gameplay we've seen so far. In general, the shield and damage UI elements are much cleaner than last year, which I definitely appreciate. Matches have opening animations like Halo 5 again, and perhaps most exciting of all, Spartan shields light up at the point of impact, giving better visual feedback for players to learn from. And I think that hits on just about everything we've learned about so far. Halo Infinite is looking amazing, sounding amazing, just overall a solid package. Criticisms from last year's demo have been addressed and the game has improved overall. 343 is really taking community feedback into consideration, and it shows. And if you want to give more direct feedback, make sure your Halo Insider profiles on Halo Waypoint are up to date for when the flight begins later this summer. We also have a ton to look forward to just this week, with a Mark 7 Spartan cosplay guide tomorrow, a Canon fodder article on Wednesday, a breakdown of the multiplayer trailer on Thursday as part of the Xbox Games Showcase Extended Show, and of course next week will feature the return of Inside Infinite, this one looking into the overhauls coming to Waypoint for Halo Infinite. We actually got a preview of some of that today, showing that you'll be able to customize your Spartan from the Waypoint site and new app. Anyway, there is a ton to love here and more to come as the week progresses. What has you most excited about Halo Infinite multiplayer? Let me know in the comments below. Stick around for the Patreon shoutouts, and until next time, this has been Halo Canon. First, I'd like to give a big thank you to our Harspice patrons. First, there's Hope, then we have Freight, and finally, SS Diko-chan. Thank you all for your amazing support of the channel. Next, I'd like to thank our theoretical patrons. If you'd like to see your name here or get a direct shout out, check out patreon.com/HaloCanon. You can simply support the channel or get additional benefits, such as behind the scenes materials, including the raw audio for videos and peeks at upcoming videos, or even shoutouts like this. All patrons now get early access to certain videos as well, and more benefits are to come. However, your continued viewership is more than enough for me. If you enjoyed this video, please consider giving it a thumbs up and maybe even subscribing to the channel if you aren't already. If you really enjoy my content, turn on that notification bell so you can be among the first to see new videos when they release. But for all my fellow Canonites, keep on being awesome.